Cool. Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the cert-manager bi-weekly for the 24th of August 2023, starting 5:05 London time. Seems we have a few people here today. We have Tim, Ash as maintainers, and Richard as well joining. We have myself as well from Venafi. We have Erik, and please forgive me, I am going to mispronounce your name, but Paweł, please correct me.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. I don't see any gender, so but given that both of you are here, I'm going to assume that you have something that you would like to discuss. Is that true? If that's true, please let me know.
I'm here because it popped up a notification on my Google Calendar, and I just wanted to show up and see how this goes on. I have a pull request for a design in approver policy, so if someone is open to talk a little bit about that at the end of the meeting, I would be happy.
Awesome. And Paweł?
Yeah, I joined to talk about the OCSP stapling issue that was raised a few months ago by Łukasz Puszkowski, and to continue work on that, or actually start working on that.
Okay, cool. Let's start with the, I'm going to say difficult one because I have no idea. I think I briefly read the issue. So the stapling issue, do you happen to have a link to the initial thing?
Yeah, it's added.
There's Tim on it.
I can copy that in the documents.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the pull request. Yeah.
Oh, there's a pull request.
Issue. Yes. Second, I will send you it.
This one?
Yeah, this will be this one. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll go back. So, okay, there's a pull request here.
Yeah, pull request was raised and closed like a week ago automatically. I don't know the name of the creator of this pull request, but I wanted to start working on from this because it was already done some part of the implementation, but like Ibo pointed out, there is still need for architecture design and thinking about how staples should be synced to the certificate. And since I'm completely new to cert-manager architecture, I don't really know how it should be placed in the issuance flow. I would really like to get some maybe small introduction to the architecture if someone would be available, and maybe some small discussion if this feature fits into cert-manager code base. We like Łukasz created this this issue because he made changes in Istio that are partially connected to this. So he added some code to Istio that will read OCSP's table secret and attach it to the request if it will be needed. So there is a need for someone to like create the staples, and at first for what I know, he created a separate service for that, but he felt like it is more the better place will be in a cert-manager for the stapling because it should be synced with the certificate.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So you would like some help and direction on
yeah.
I'd progress
how
this.
to start regarding this. Yeah, because I don't want to like start working on OCSP stapling and then basically rearranging everything because I have no knowledge on the architecture that is currently used.
Cool. No, but I think you've come to the right place. So I'm gonna hand it over to probably Ash, because I think you're about to talk. Because you're gonna have a better introduction to this than I am. So
you saw me unmuting, didn't you? Yeah. So I found the part of the discussion that we had when Lukasz joined and we talked about this.
Mhm.
I think I was in the United States and jet lagged at the time, so my memory might be a little bit hazy on this, but my recollection of that discussion was that we spoke about it for quite a while, and then towards the end, someone, and it might have been Richard who's on this call, raised a point that convinced me that cert-manager shouldn't do this, and that this lived in the web server code rather than in cert-manager. That's because the OCSP staple, if you like, I think it's because it was the life cycle of it is tied to the web server and not in and not tied directly to the certificate. So I don't remember fully because it's quite a while ago, but my initial recollection was that there seemed to be some consensus between the maintainers then that this was probably a thing for something like an Nginx or another web server rather than cert-manager itself. Him may have a better memory than I.
Not directly, but I to that point, what I think you kind of get when you let cert-manager do these create these OCSP staples is that it's kind of an alternative to just issue certificates with shorter lifespans, because you're already updating that secret, and the web server has to like read the secret and so on, or like on the file system had to reload that thing. You could as well just issue a new certificate and use a new certificate, I think, to have like shorter lifespan. And I feel like you kind of lose the benefit, if that makes sense. Maybe that was also kind of what Richard was saying last time.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
desperately trying to remember what I said. I can't I can't remember. I'm sorry. I think I looked up some Nginx documentation, and it seemed to do something on its own, or one of the web servers did. I do remember the conversation though. Sorry, I can't help anymore.
Peter's found the relevant part now on the screen share. Yeah, like I say, I distinctly remember being positive about it at first, and then I'm sure it was Richard that convinced me that it was not a thing that we should do in cert-manager. I'd be open to being convinced that we actually should do it in cert-manager, but I think my default is that we probably shouldn't, because my instinct is that web servers should be the ones that do this. What are you thinking, Paweł?
From my scope of knowledge, like a staple should be synced with certificate that it's assigned to, and like cert-manager basically fits if we think of it from this point. I watched the video from the meeting that Lukasz was in, and I remember like you pointed out like it maybe it's better to move it. In our case, like we are using still the Envoy, like it should be into the Envoy proxy. So I understand that, but then I don't know how we should then keep it in sync, the certificate issuance and staples when whenever it will be ready to be reissued. So I think like it may fit in cert-manager, and I understand that it's the really small case scenario. Like we want to use it basically, like the only people that want to use that is probably me and Signicat. And basically because we already created like from what I know, because Łukasz was working on it previously, he created already like POC with a service that will do that in sync instead of doing it in cert-manager. And at that point, the discussion in our team was like it maybe should go to the cert-manager instead of being maintained separately. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's tricky. I can see. So I'm looking at Nginx for context here. The documentation I'll put in chat. And they can go and fetch OCSP staples on their own. So Nginx can be configured to go and do that as long as you give it a DNS resolver to talk to. But it does also have the ability to have a file provided as well that it can read it from. So that at least implies that other servers have the ability to read this. Like certainly we had a concern that Envoy was going to be the only thing, and that's like other things can at least read the response. I suppose that points towards the fact that it might be something worthwhile doing in cert-manager. I just don't know if this kind of thing is necessarily tied to the issuance of a certificate. Like obviously it would be updated when a certificate is renewed, but I don't know if I don't think it needs to be done when a certificate is issued. And with that said, I think adding this to cert-manager would add some fairly significant complexity, like just I'm guessing, and so that I would be nervous about adding that level of complexity for such a relatively niche feature, if that makes sense.
It definitely required some extra architecture to keep in sync 3 secrets in one time and keeping like the separate flow only for stapling. So it will definitely add a lot of more complexity to the code base. So yeah, I think that's a correct assumption.
The other side to it as well is that if like Nginx can support it from a file, as we can see here, but they can also fetch it themselves. I know Apache can also go and fetch a staple itself. With that in mind, we could add it to cert-manager, but the only case where we've heard that it would probably be needed would be Envoy. And then like what if I'm an Envoy user that doesn't use cert-manager, right? Like I would then expect that Envoy would support fetching the stapling information itself, and that would then solve your problem, as I understand it, right? If Envoy did have that capability to fetch the stapling data.
Yeah, basically, yeah, we just want to have the stapling ability in some place.
Yeah, like to me, then that like adding it in cert-manager works in your case, but like it doesn't work in the case that I'm using Envoy and not using cert-manager. So then I'd be thinking, well, I probably want to be talking to the Envoy team to see if they can do it. I don't want to shoot down the idea or anything, but like I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the return is there for us adding it, given that it would basically be this tiny little use case, and would come with some complexity and a fair bit of learning and work on top of that.
Maybe it would be useful to kind of repeat what the benefits for a cert-manager user would be if you add OCSP stapling. Like, how do you get value out of this?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
How do you get value out of these OCSP staples that are added by cert-manager?
So in our case, we are using the forest certificate assurance that's encrypted, so we have certificate from there, and we also are using history with Envoy. So if we can implement it in Envoy, like I said, and someone would like to use cert-manager and don't have this feature, and like, or use the Envoy and they don't need the stepping, it's sounds like a reasonable choice, like not to implement it there. But for what we need, it's basically like we want to have that functionality to increase security on just OCSP. With this additional complexity, like increases the security of the OCSP itself. And so the place where the logic will go, I don't feel like it matters that much for us, as long as we can easily implement it, like put it somewhere. I don't know how it may fit in Envoy.
I'm just wondering if we should reopen the issue and just put some thoughts on there that we think this might potentially be a small use case, and maybe because I was thinking, if we do a design document, that might be quite a lot of work, and then if we just say that get the end of the design and work out it's not worth doing, I wouldn't want to waste your time doing a design document just to say it's not worth doing, but at least it would be a record of having discussed the issue and the benefits and the drawbacks of it. But maybe the issue is a better place to continue that discussion, so we could just reopen the issue.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay.
We can then add more parties from Signicat also, because I'm not the only one that was working on it. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's so reopen the issue first. I'm also just wondering if it would be, your use cases with Envoy, but if getting some input from someone on the Envoy project around the topic and whether it fits in the code base there or here, and kind of expanding that might give us a better idea of what should happen. Yeah, I'm just conscious again. We support Ingress and Gateway API, and there are lots of Ingress controllers that then have either their own implementations of Ingress or type things. Do we do it for one, then it has to be done for another, and then it could open up a can of worms. And whilst we welcome obviously people to input code, it's great having the initial code. It's even better to have someone to maintain it for a long time. Okay, so let's reopen the issue. When it's open, if you could maybe add your value case to the discussion. I will go up and read up about what this is, because I'm talking about it having no idea, and
Okay.
I'm not about to work it out in the next 5 minutes. So is that a good place to start? And then maybe we go from there. Okay. Awesome. Cool. So someone, if that's all right, let's move on to the next sort of topic we got here. We got release 1.13. Who added that?
I did, yes. So
Go ahead.
It's just a bit of talk, I guess, about the next cert-manager release. So if you want to follow what we're doing, you can actually go to the milestone, the 113 milestone, and you can see what we identified as the blocking issues for 113. And we're constantly trying to make progress on those issues and PRs. But we also might add some new things when we see that there are some things that we still have to fix. we kind of missed the original release deadline, so I think at this point we want to release as soon as possible, as long as our resources kind of allow it. I'm not sure if we can actually already say what kind of deadlines we're thinking about, because that might still change. But I would say personally, I would like to do like a beta release this week or like next week, unless there's anything else I have to do and I don't have time to work on that. It's an interesting release. I think one of the major things in this release is that we merged a PR to allow configuring the control plane options through a config file instead of just flags. Then we also added this DNS over HTTP feature, which basically allows certain environments where all traffic has to go over HTTP to also do ACME challenges, which was requested by the community. And I'm sure there are a lot of other fixes and improvements that I haven't listed yet, and those will be in the release notes once we get there. And finally, I would like to maybe call to all the approvers and reviewers to have a look at the milestone and leave some reviews. I think right now we're in a pretty good state. So I think the upgrade all dependencies PR needs a review still, but I might not have finished rebasing it on master. So there's actually some work from me necessary there. So actually it's blocked on me, sorry. But that's kind of the status update. That's what we are doing. Yeah. And that's it. I have one other thing actually that I would like to add to the calendar now that I'm talking. And that is the PR that we have around the governance of cert-manager. So Mile has already talked about this in one of the earlier bi-weeklies. But this is the current design that we have. I'll link it in the description. Basically, in order for us to become a graduated CNCF project, this is one of the requirements. So that's what kind of initiated the work on this. But then we realized that this could be a very useful thing if we also add like additional roles and really create this this contributor ladder where there are multiple different roles and we can help people contribute to cert-manager. So if you look at what is in the changes there, yes, or what's in that document, you can see all the different roles and basically the ladder, it goes from top to the file to the bottom. So every role kind of depends on the previous role. So the initial role is GitHub member. This is a very basic thing that can be obtained by everyone who contributes to cert-manager in any way. And then you have reviewers. These people, they can use LGTM on PRs. Then there's approvers who can use approve on PRs. And then there is maintainers, I think. And then there's also administrators, which is basically maintainers, but with a lot more responsibilities because they have to fix all the production problems. And that's kind of it. So this is mostly called to all the maintainers because they will have to approve this, but anyone is free to leave a comment on this. But yeah, take a look at the documents, leave a review, leave some comments if there's something not clear, if there's something that we didn't think about, please mention it so that we can still fix it. That's kind of it. after this, it should be much easier to contribute to cert-manager and to also become a maintainer. That's actually the ultimate goal, for more people to become maintainers. Yes, Peter.
Awesome. I think this is pretty interesting. I had a very specific question, but I'm going to generalize it in that this document is explaining the ideal, right? It's not really explaining how we'll actually maintain said list of people in particular, because I'm just wondering the requirements for a GitHub member is someone in the last 18 months who might have posted on a Slack channel, which might be quite a manual task to update that list of members.
I think below it says becoming a GitHub member, so that kind of states how you become one. It's not that we will automatically make everyone a GitHub member. It's not an automated process, but basically I think you have to create a PR kind of stating what you've done in terms of contributions, and that we can make you a GitHub member, which basically means that we add you to the cert-manager GitHub repository or the GitHub organization. And after you become a GitHub member, you can become a reviewer and so on.
Got you. So it's up to a person to submit the PR to say, hey, I've been involved in this project for the last 6 months. I would like to become a member, get approved.
Yes.
And,
yeah. And it's up to the admins to make that change. So it's still a manual thing. But one requirement for a GitHub member is that you have to be active. So you have to be, I think it says, members that have been inactive over the past 18 months may be removed from the GitHub organization. And because every other role is kind of dependent on GitHub member, this means that it's this case for every role, basically. So if you're an approver or reviewer and in the past 18 months you have not interacted in any way with the cert-manager community, we can actually remove you from that role. And that's kind of why that GitHub membership is there. But also just anyone who contributed to cert-manager, we want to give them a label that they can share with other people and can be proud about and say, well, actually, I am part of the group of members of cert-manager.
Cool. And sorry, I'll just say one more thing, because this might be obvious, but I'm just checking. The idea is you can become a member who is active in, say, discussing issues, documentation. You don't necessarily need to have written or changed or reviewed code per se, but all those things are still valuable. And yeah, I'm seeing a bit of a nod. But
yeah,
awesome.
And this,
cool, Eric.
This is definitely like, for example, sorry. Go ahead, Eric. I don't have anything interesting to say.
It might be a dumb question, but are you becoming a member of the cert-manager organization, so it will give you the permissions in all the projects, or would you have to do it per project?
I think this will be just a global thing, because it's a member of the GitHub organization.
Yeah, it seems similar to what they do in Kubernetes. So you have the Kubernetes and the Kubernetes 6. I'm a member in 6, but not in Kubernetes. So yeah,
I feel like for sub-projects like trust manager and approval policy, would probably be a bit more lenient. I would say, like, you could become, maybe people who aren't involved in the wider projects could become specifically involved in, say, trust manager if they had a particular interest in maintaining that. A cert-manager itself is kind of a special case because it's so much bigger and everything.
Yeah, I totally understand that. That was more or less the reason I asked, because I'm starting to get involved in these other projects, and I could be interested in discussing taking some more responsibility there.
That would be awesome, yeah. For things like, for the other sub-projects, I'm sure we could be super lenient, like open on that. At the end of the day, the more the merrier. Like, it's all about getting people involved.
I think right now there's no real distinction yet between all the different projects. It's just kind of cert-manager, whatever cert-manager means. Yeah, but I think because Trust Manager is, for example, part of the cert-manager organization, GitHub membership is kind of the same. I like personally, if you are like working on Trust Manager, want to become an approver or reviewer on Trust Manager, I would also just add you to the GitHub organization. I think that kind of makes sense. And then only add you to the owners file of the Trust Manager project, for example. Kind of organize it that way. That's not specified in this file right now. I think CNCF also is mostly concerned about cert manager itself, maybe not as much about Trust Manager and so on. So yeah, but yeah, leave a review please, and let's discuss it maybe on GitHub or some other medium. But I feel like it's okay to not specifically mention it maybe right now. I would like to hear from the rest what they think about it.
I think, frankly, up to the reviewer role, it should be quite easy to get into that role. But beyond that, it should have more consideration. Becoming an approver or a maintainer is a responsible job in Cert Manager.
Definitely, yeah. There's also, like, when you start creating this kind of documents, you also start thinking about all the bad things that could happen, and kind of think about, like, okay, well, how do we protect against certain things that happen? Maybe like a wrong PR that gets approved or something like that. But right now, I think, for example, the release of Cert Manager is still something that is like something done by administrators. So you already have to be an administrator to release something bad if that would get merged. So there is still a bit of a protection system, let's say. Even if you're an approver or a reviewer, there's still some protection that prevents us from crazy stuff happening.
I mean, people do mistakes all the time, even maintainers and administrators. So there must be more barriers to kind of secure ourselves from doing something really bad that might affect a lot of users, of course.
Yeah, I mean, releasing something with a bug in, that's kind of, well, it's hard to prevent that. But of course, it's something we do our very best for to prevent. And we definitely, like as a maintainer, I think it's also in the documents, you are responsible to, in time, create like a patch release and so on to fix these kind of things. Yeah.
It's part of the supply chain security topic. Yeah, definitely. Just on the sub-projects thread, I think we should have something, even if it just says that at the minute, these rules will apply to Cert Manager org, which includes all projects, but people would be willing to, just work on the projects that they wanted to work on, Becoming a member doesn't mean you have to look at Cert Manager and approval policy and everything under the sun. So I think something is better than nothing. Because I had the same sort of question. But yeah, no, that's really cool. I think having some guidelines is better. As someone who isn't a Go person, like having some idea about how best to contribute and how best other people in a similar position can contribute will be good to have more voices in calls like this. Was there anything else on that topic before we move on to the final topic?
Maybe one more thing to state is that, like, this is not just about code, it's also about contributions to our website, or documentation, helping people out in the Slack channels, all that kind of stuff is also very important for us as a cert-manager project. And I think it's also important that that kind of is reflected in this document. So reviewers and approvers, I think, should also apply to website change and so on. So we must make sure that all these different kinds of contributions are taken into account.
I am. I realize I'm still sharing the wrong tab. I'm making a note of that. I want to encourage all contributions. Okay. So, okay, if there's nothing else on that topic, Erik, we have a PR. Let me open that up and switch to it.
Yes, let me introduce a bit. I created this design because I made a proof of concept of a approval policy plugin where you could specify CEL expressions to kind of configure which certificate should be accepted by, should be approved by the approval policy. But while it works, it's kind of inconvenient to use a plugin because it's harder to work with and difficult to configure. And there's also an open issue, which has been standing open in approval policy for a long time, that you want to create policies that are based on the namespace the certificate signing request is created in. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that introducing CEL into this is a good idea. The question is just how to do it, and it's my first attempt to write some design for the any cert-manager project. So I'm a bit wondering how's the process normally proceeding.
I think the process is you create a design and we review it. But I think that the second part hasn't yet been addressed, maybe. Yeah, there are quite a few design documents that we haven't reviewed yet, and I tried to create a list of them and kind of push us to spend more time on it. But I think it's more of a resourcing issue right now.
Yeah.
We just have to spend a bit more time doing that and maybe bump it a bit on our priority list. Yeah. Ashley, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think you said it well. Like at the end of the day, we haven't been doing that much lately, and I think a decent part of that has been like to sort of reorganizations and like prioritization and all that kind of thing. There is a system within Venafi now whereby we might be able to prioritize things that are in the open and sort of get into that, but we've not really, as developers, been utilizing that much. It's a fairly new thing. So I'd like to say it should get better. Like I think we will use that system more at some point in the future and end up prioritizing open source maintenance things above certain sort of closed source enterprisey things that we do. It's just there's been a lot of change, and that's meant that there's a lot of things have got sort of left behind, and sorry about that. It's a shame. I'm hoping.
Well, we just want to release some of the airbag restriction we currently have on using cert-manager. That's the main reason for trying to get this through somehow. Yeah, there are still some open discussions on the PR, especially around how the API should be for putting in your CEL expressions. it would be very nice if some of you could take a look and share your opinion. I wish Josh could be here, because he was kind of the initial architect. He wrote most of the approver policy initial code. I guess there were a few discussions on how to design the API when it was designed in the first place. So I have a feeling that it will not a good idea, at least not at this point, to kind of refactor the whole API. I'm thinking we should try to introduce this in a non-breaking manner, so everything that is currently in the API will still work. So this comes in as an optional feature that people can use if they want.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, breaking changes are always sort of painful for everyone and are best to be avoided. Like, I tend to agree with that in general. I haven't looked at the specific design to be able to comment specifically on it, but I think I remember I skimmed over it very briefly and it looked really good. But unfortunately, that's the best I can give you for now. I want to take a look, but at least for probably the next week for me personally, I'm not going to be able to, if not longer than that. It's just how it is at the moment, I'm afraid.
Yeah, the devil's in the details, as always. It might look good from a kind of a bird perspective, but when you dig into it, you really have to take some hard decisions on how to do it.
Yeah.
From what I kind of remember when I looked at the PR is that you basically listed all the different possibilities in the design document. Is that correct, Erik?
List all the
different possibilities in terms of how we could approach this problem.
There probably are other variants. There is one that I should add. I mean, when reading through it once again after I wrote it, I realized that we should probably try to get closer to how CEL is used in Kubernetes, how you can use it in CRDs. The issue there is that I think now we're moving into the details, but I think the validation in Kubernetes are more of you and all the validations together. So that means when you validate, you have to satisfy all of the rules that you specify. But in this case, I think it makes more sense to put an or. If you come from how a user would use it. And also that would be more in accordance with the current API for policies to approve a policy. Because there you have like things like values, and you say that I will accept any certificate signing request which satisfy at least one of the values specified. So it's an or between them.
Okay, well, I thought that the reason in CRDs that you have AND is because you can specify per rule like an error message and so on, like some feedback.
Yeah.
And like if this rule fails, you give this error message. If this rule fails, you give this error message. If you have or, like you would just say none of the things actually
exactly
succeeded.
And that's why I'm mentioning specifically this, because then it won't work with a message if you put an or between it, because you have to list all the things that didn't satisfy the requirements.
Yeah. It is like you can still do or by just oring in CEL, I guess.
You can, but it will be less readable, in my opinion. And the CEL expression might become very complex. I mean, we've been working a bit with CEL in some of our operators. So we are gradually using more and more CEL. And I mean, you always get problems with the cost, the maximum cost a CEL expression can have in the API server. So if we are starting to calculate the cost of the expression, they will become very complicated if we start to include everything in one expression. At least they might become very easily.
Mm-hmm. But we can set the cost limits as high as we want to, right?
Of course.
We already got the CEL CEL environment and evaluator and so on.
I'm pretty sure we will not set a cost requirement, because I mean this is something completely different than the API server, which has a lot of responsibilities in addition to validating CEL expressions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, in cert-manager itself, we are generating private and public key pairs and so on. So that's also very costly. So I would say,
of course,
it's okay to have a high cost.
Yeah. As I said at the start of this meeting, I was just coming here to meet you guys and say hello, because it popped up on my calendar and I had time to come. So I didn't expect to get this get progress on this area in this meeting for sure.
It's good that you try to motivate us a bit to work on it.
That's what I'm trying to do. Kind of, do you have like SIGs in cert-manager? So you have a kind of smaller groups that are well, more responsible for trust manager, more responsible for approval policy, or haven't you reached that level yet?
No, I think right now we are with too little people to have SIGs, actually. Everyone would be in every SIG, I guess.
Yeah. I haven't seen James for a while, and Josh is also very inactive lately.
Yeah, I think because we work for Venafi, we have quite a bit of time to spend on the project. The people who don't work for Venafi, it's a bit harder, I feel like. They really have to do it in the free time.
Yeah.
So that's a bit harder. So I guess in a way, that's also what we try to do with the governance thing. We want to have maybe more people which are maybe less active, if that makes sense. Instead of like a small group with highly active people, and kind of work more that way. Yeah, right now I think it's just us who have to reprioritize reviewing design documents. It's also a bit less fun than writing code, I think. That's maybe also part of the problem.
That I understand. That's a very common problem.
Erik, how important is it for you to get this CEL support into the open source approval policy project? Didn't I remember that you'd created a prototype controller, which did
I did that.
I mean, all I can think is that I guess if the CEL stuff got merged into approval policy, you in your case would only be using CEL based policies. You wouldn't be trying to mix it with the existing other fields in the CRD, would you?
Well, that's part of the challenge. When you use a plugin, the plugin has to be aligned with what you specify in the policy API.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is create kind of a wider policy using the current API, and then you kind of harden it by using the CEL expressions in your plugin. So it will work.
I mean, you could almost like say we could abandon approval policy, what's there now, and people could bring their own approval policy implementations. Or, the API is one part of the API is the field in the certificate request, which allows you to set an approved or a denied conditional or whatever it is. So why limit yourself to the approval policy plugin mechanism, which isn't really a plugin mechanism, which we all hate anyway?
Yeah, I know that. That's why I want to get it into the API, because I like to have public policies in the sense that it's human readable. It can be read by business people also, and you don't have to look into the Go code to kind of find the rules for your policy. I like it to be in clear text, and that's what I like about the approver policy and keeping the policy in the API.
Okay, I'm waffling, but if you released your CEL approver implementation, I would probably just turn off the cert-manager approver policy. If I was in a company, if I was a platform administrator, and I had the choice of using Erik's CEL-based approver versus the cert-manager inflexible approver, I would switch. And so I would almost just encourage you to forge ahead with your own approver. Is that controversial?
Yeah, but we also, once we start using the some kind of approver policy, it has to handle all the cases in our cluster, and we use cert-manager for a lot of other things as well, which is easily to solve with the current API for approver policies. So
Okay.
yeah,
That's something I didn't. Perhaps I'm not fully understanding then. Yeah.
and we have large clusters which are multi-tenant, so we would prefer the policies to kind of be available through the API and available to all our users, and we might have different requirements depending. So we might use the approver policy as it is now, but in general, if you don't get a special policy by the cluster administrator, you will have to admit to the ones that we tend to want to create with CEL. So we want them to be aligned and to work on the same bucket of certificates.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a question, Erik. I think in the design you mentioned something about a use case of simplifying RBAC. Is that one of the use cases in the design doc?
No, it's not explicitly stated there, but that is kind of my main motivation to kind of, because now when we install cert-manager, we harden the RBAC. We don't allow our users to create certificates or anything.
Oh.
So what we have created at least two operators which will indirectly create a cert-manager certificate, but then we add RBAC to those operators. But using an operator with a CRD, we kind of limit the user to what we think the user should be allowed to set, in a sense.
What? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
A follow-on question. What about? Have you looked at other policy controllers for Kubernetes? I'm thinking of things like Kyverno or Gatekeeper here, or.
Yeah, we have just introduced Kyverno, but we are still kind of experimenting with it, and it's a beast, and it requires a lot of RBAC in our clusters. So we are slowly adopting Kyverno, but we might get somewhere with it. So it's a valid point. We could use Kyverno for some of these things. True.
Okay, cool. Sorry, that was a very leading question as well. I can see. So I did want to, and we've got like 2 minutes left. So if we don't mind, I really want to give you a little small update here because I think it's kind of relevant. So a little while ago, I gave an update on there was an issue about certificate presets, which was like a top issue in cert-manager, and I tried to do some investigation. Richard's at the last call, I think it was, made a very good point. Like, can we do this? Why have it in cert-manager? Can it be done with another policy engine? So there's a very small section at the bottom here, very rough, basic notes from testing. But so again, I am also no expert in Kyverno and policy things, but what the essence of what we found so far is that most things, unless they're required, it is fairly easy to have a very simple YAML policy that will, default the revision history limit in the certificate object, for example, because it's not a required field, but if not specified, you can override it, and if it's specified, you can let that through. I think what we found, or what I found so far and kind of got a little bit stuck with, is that cert-manager has some validating / mutating webhook resources, and it also validates, there are some required fields. So issuer ref, for example, and secret name are like required fields. So secret name is interesting because I think that's a really good one that you would do a CEL expression for if you had the option in that you would, do certificate object.name / TLS certificate or whatever appended thing you want on it. But yeah, I've got some more investigation to do, but my overall experience with Caverno is it's been quite simple and easy to get started. So I do intend to try and write something, but my focus was around certificate objects, which is why I kind of asked, because a poor policy is like certificate request objects. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I just wanted to share.
It could work there too, couldn't it, Peter? I mean, if you were just using CSI driver, no. Yeah, if you were just using CSI driver, you could use Caverno to default or mutate, maybe override some of the certificate request fields.
Yeah,
I can't think of an example, but probably could be useful. And we think it probably is possible to override some of those required fields, like secret name. I didn't know whether you would say. Did you, Peter, say that you thought it was not possible to provide defaults for the required fields?
Yes. So I was looking at it from this perspective of how little of a certificate object could I get away with applying as well. So my use case as a tenant in anywhere in a cluster is that if I can create a certificate object, I mostly don't care what's in it, and I would very much just like as much as possible be defaulted, even to the extent of the issuer for most cases, because if I'm in the namespace and I'm a tenant of a cluster, I might expect that someone set me up an issuer, and I usually use the one that's there. I can't use any others, so just use that one. So yeah, if you could just create cert with a name, and it would default the issuer, and I might want to choose a secret name, but you might want to set a standard. What I found is that as long as you provide a value for the required values, you can let that through. In Caverno, you can choose whether you actually want to mutate over the top of it, or you want to let the value through if specified. So, and what I'm trying to weigh this up against the GitOps patterns that I see, in that how much do you want to enforce that's going to cause a thing to be out of sync? Because if you enforce a thing that's out of sync, but it's a required field, that kind of causes a little bit of friction between all the people involved. So trying to find a nice way forward on that.
And so the Caverno mutating webhook doesn't trigger before the before the cert-manager one, or what is the order of how does that work? Is there an order of mutating webhooks?
Mutations happen first, apparently, and then validations, so that validations can validate that the mutations did what they were meant to do. But within all your mutations, I don't know if there's an ordering. I couldn't find anything out.
There is probably an ordering, but I think the best practice is not to rely on an ordering.
But isn't that the problem, where we use some of the values in the in our mutating webhook to mutate, like to generate other fields? Is that how it works?
The cert-manager mutating webhook should only be mutating certificate requests, and Peter so far has only tried this with certificates. So the problems we were seeing were unexpected.
Unexplainable.
Unexpected. I mean, it should, given what we've read in the documentation, we should be able to mutate the certificate, add to a certificate fields which are later checked by the validating webhook.
And are these errors coming from the API server? Are you certain about that, or is it like open API validation that's locally happening?
It's that error
Oh,
there.
okay. So it
Um,
says admission webhook denied request. Okay.
I first tried with the issuer, but thought maybe because the issuer is an object that I was getting the policy wrong. So I tried with the secret name and got the same error, but I only pasted the one error just because I was too busy looking at code afterwards. If it helps, maybe let me, because it might help to give some context. Because I guess if anyone ever watches this in back, they might not know what Caverno is. I will share this. I think it's this one.
But Peter, that's exactly what you were saying, right? You first run the mutating webhooks and then the validating webhooks. So why is the validating webhook then failing? That's the weird thing, right?
Yes, and there's probably
You were suspicious that we were suspicious that the mutating rule wasn't taking effect, but then you verified that by turning off the cert-manager webhooks and saw that the mutation was correctly being applied.
My hypothesis, but I'm yet to kind of prove it, is that the mutation applies and maybe sets a default value for the field if it's not set, even if that default value is empty. At which point the Caverno policy might not apply because it might say you have a value even if it's empty, and then it gets to the thing and it says it's empty, so you need to provide a value for this on the validation side. So
you'll have to restate that. I don't understand that. What? Say it again, Peter.
So I'm thinking that the cert-manager mutation might take the object and I'm hypothesizing that it possibly adds, say, a secret name key and value if one isn't specified in the YAML resource by the user, but that value will be empty because it can't actually give it a real value, so to speak.
Oh, it's like filling in 0 values for empty struct fields.
Yes.
We have been struggling a bit with that in some of our webhooks. Just by introducing the webhooks, we were actually setting values that were not set before we started using the webhook. It depends on how the API is designed on the Go level.
Right. Because you're submitting YAML, which doesn't contain a secret field. It gets unmarshaled by the mutation webhook, which adds the 0 value, and then it gets back.
So obviously the Caverno policy sees a value and goes, well, he said I want to let through a value if there is a value, and there is a value, but it just happens to be blank. And then the validation applies and says it's blank and you can't have that. So that the consequence is I don't want to enforce one standard value. I mean, maybe you could if you had one cert in the namespace and that was the pattern, you could do that. But for the vast majority of people, they might have 2 certs and you don't want the same secret name. So yeah, I mean, for anyone wanting, to try it out, this is probably about as simple as a policy can almost get. There's one little tricky bit of syntax there where that is basically the syntax that says if it's present, use the value that's applied, not this value. But you could kind of see how if you were to change this to instead, I don't know CEL, but I'm just going to go object.name, what the real string would be, and then hyphen cert. That's what I kind of like to see, which relates it back to Erik's discussion on CEL. But anyway, we are way over time. Sorry, I took us down a little rabbit hole there. I want to thank you all for your input. We should probably stop the recording there, I think. Tim, if you could do the honors.